Cervélo have just this week announced their very sleek new 2022 R5 road bike. This is the fourth generation of Cervélo's racing all-rounder. Think of it as their GC bike if you like. We actually first saw this bike being raced in this year's Tour de France by Team Jumbo-Visma. This is Wout Van Aert piloting the bike on the mountainous Stage 8. At the time we thought maybe the bike might have been named the R6, but in fact they're staying with the original R5 name. Before we dig into all the cool features of this new machine, let me give you 5 key details which you don't want to miss. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Number 1, this new frame is 130 grams lighter than the previous model. Number 2, the new fork brings much more compliance to the front end and weighs just 329 grams. Number 3, lots of aero tweaks going on here, including the fully internal cable routing. All of this is added up to a 25 grams savings in drag. Number 4, a 56 centimetre frame weighs in at just 703 grams, taking in the overall weight, including the fork, to just a smidge over a kilo. And finally, tyre clearance has grown to a very generous 34 millimeters, keeping the R5 in line with the latest trend towards wider tyres and wider rims on road bikes. Okay, so it seems you can build an R5 extremely light, but why reduce the bike's stiffness at the front end and why increase the tyre clearance? After all, this is their all-out climbers machine. Feedback from the riders at Jumbo-Visma, and especially Tom Dumoulin, voiced complaints on the previous R5's front end, and in particular the harsh feel of the fork. The team felt that the mountain goat climbing ability of the previous bike was somewhat negated by the overtly stiff feel. Over the duration of a Grand Tour, some of the team felt like the bike got progressively more uncomfortable as the weeks rolled on. Now, the idea of reducing stiffness on a climbing bike seems like the wrong way to go, but Cervélo's engineering team had previously found a particular stiffness ratio between head tube and bottom bracket, which gave the magic formula on ride quality. And that magic figure is where the head tube has 45% of the overall stiffness of the bottom bracket. Looking back, lead engineer Scott admits that the goal on the previous bike was all about ultimate stiffness. And this is a problem when riding on roads that are less than optimal. Hands up if you ride potholed roads. And talking of rough roads, if you want to know what the best pressures are to run in your road tyres, then click on the card above or the link in the description. So with the new fork, they looked at the numbers and decided that they should maintain the lateral stiffness, that's what gives the R5 its handling that the riders loved, and then back down on the longitudinal stiffness. This would add a little bit more compliance fore and aft. The seat tube junction, you may have noticed, has been dropped to around 15 millimeters on this latest model. This reduces the standover height and increases compliance at the rear of the bike. All of this new data was applied to the design, and Cervélo built a few different layouts, tested them, and then shipped them all off to Team Jumbo-Visma. Tom Dumoulin, who had lots and lots of experience on the previous model from his time at Sunweb, was the prime candidate for testing. Tom's feedback on the new fork and bike, Cervélo tell us, has been welcomingly positive. As I said earlier, this was one of the more vocal riders that had front-end complaints from that previous model. Cervélo are really pleased to report that no one has complained about it on this version at all. In our opinion, well, it's a really positive move from Cervélo, and we can't help thinking that lessons learnt from bikes like the brilliant Caledonia 5 endurance bike and the Aspero gravel bike are all being applied here. If you're interested to know more about the Caledonia, it scored really highly in our Bike of the Year test this year, so check out the card above or the link in the description to this video. But why focus on building a lightweight bike in 2021? When Cervélo started to develop the new bike back in 2019, they had seen that their pro riders were just as likely to stick with the brand's aero-focused bikes rather than switch between models. This was because the weight difference between the R and the S series bikes was just so minimal. They therefore decided to switch focus up on the new bike to create a pure climbers bike. Cervélo's engineering manager Scott Roy was keen, however, to stress that their pro riders loved the existing geometry and the famous great handling of the previous R5. Interestingly, the geometry on the new bike does actually see the fork trail adjusted by just ½ a millimetre. This is there to compensate because of the trend towards bigger tyres. After all, a bike that climbs this well also needs to be able to descend just as well and carve through mountainous road corners with the same ease too. So let's talk a little bit more about weight savings. Once loaded up with bottle cages, bottles, computer mounts, power meters, etc., the previous generation R5 really struggled to meet the UCI limit of 6.8 kilos. That meant the key objective was to bring the weight down significantly to make it easier to build a complete race-ready bike that could trouble the minimal weight limit. With a reworking of the carbon schedule, layup, materials, and a few tweaks to the shapes, Cervélo have been able to take out a not insignificant 130 grams from this frame. The new R5 is impressively svelte at 703 grams for a size 56 centimetre, painted and finished frame. That actually brings it within reach of Cervélo's legendary lightweight chassis of days gone by. I'm talking about bikes like the 680 gram R5CA or the 666 gram RCA. It's worth noting, however, that both of those were hyper expensive and very, very limited edition bikes, and both were rim brake only. When I say hyper expensive, I mean around $10,000 for a frame set alone. The new R5 is a stock bike, and you guessed it, disc brake only. I spoke to Cervélo earlier in the week, and they hinted that there may be a special version harking back to those legendary lightweight frames in the offing. Wouldn't confirm or deny. I would say keep an eye on BikeRadar, because we'll break the news when we hear it first. It's not just in the frame where weight has been saved. Cervélo also looked to their parts to save a few more grams. The new HB13 handlebar shaves 12 grams from the previous model, and the new ST31 stem also drops 12 grams, and the new dedicated SP24 aerodynamic carbon seat post shaves 20 grams too. So all in all, that's another 48 grams saved. The bike comes with a new Reserve 37 wheels with a 34mm deep front and a 37mm deep rear, and these are built up on this particular bike with DT Swiss 370 hubs. On the more expensive models, so the Red or the Dura-Ace, that switches up to the DT 240S. Tubeless ready, Vittoria Corsa TLR G 2.0 tyres finish off the build, and they do come set up tubeless, thanks Cervélo. Curiously, these are in a 25C width, but for everyday riding, particularly where I'd live, I'd quickly step up to a 28mm tyre instead. Of course, if you disagree with me, let us know in the comments, and check out our video, Are Wider Tyres Faster? You can find them in the card above or in the link in the description. You might have noticed a slight change in backdrop. We're out here filming just on the outskirts of Salisbury Plain, and the Army has just decided to have a few live firing exercises. So rather than hear heavy ordnance, we've moved a couple of miles down the road. Down tube is slimmer than the previous model and contributes significantly to the overall reduction in drag, although Cervélo don't give any real-world figures here. The final and perhaps the most surprising change to the R5 shape is the huge increase in tyre clearance. The previous generation disc model could, at a push, take a 30mm tyre. The new R5 pushes that out to an impressive 34mm. Perhaps the new R5 isn't just a climber's weapon after all. To us, it sounds like a classics bike too. Though Cervélo are quick to point out, just don't call it a cross bike. Our test model Cervélo have supplied us with is this 58cm test bike. It's complete with SRAM force axis, and it tips our scales at 7.54 kilos. How would you like to spec this bike? We think it would be interesting to see just how light you could make it while still preserving all of its aero qualities. Sadly, it only arrived a couple of days before the launch date on Wednesday this week, so we've yet to get any serious miles in on the bike. Of course, I've had to go for a quick ride in that time, and my first impressions are really positive. We'll report back as soon as we've had enough time to get some proper distance in on the bike. So remember to check out BikeRadar.com for that full review as soon as I've had enough time to get through it on the bike. What do you think of the Cervélo R5 for 2022? Are you happy to see the new bike with the focus on weight? Do you wish it was available in a rim brake model? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that little bell icon. Every time we upload a new video, you'll get a notification.